Hello everyone, I am back. Let me update you on what's going on. Okay, so here is the C8 Bad Sport front end. That's what I'm calling this car, Bad Sport. So here it is mocked up, but there are some pieces missing. It's not 100%, it's just close enough to figure out what we're going to do. On the driver's side, I've got this fender. The back fender is the one that was off of my C8, the C8 to C2 conversion. And then I grafted on or screwed on, whatever, the fender flare from the C2 Grand Sport. Now this is from my splash mold that I made, and it was just to see where everything went, but it's not finished. It doesn't have the lip underneath here, if you can see, which needs to be there. But the intent was just to get the idea and to make it to where I could remove the mold. If I would have put the lip there, I wouldn't have been able to remove the mold. It was hard enough to remove as it was. So what I did was I made another fender. This one was off of a not so accurate C2 Grand Sport. I say not accurate because the headlights are different on this one than they should be. The area that's in the shadow, that's kind of funny, shouldn't be there. It should be like this one where the headlights are exposed on the sides. But all I needed was the actual fender flare, and this one does have the lip on it, so this will replace that one at the given time. Plus the back of the fender, when they cut it off, they cut off that section right there. It's missing. This one has that section. Not sure if it's going to stay like that or not, but at least that's something to work with. I do have this section as well, which was here, and I cut it off previously just so I could have the fender flare. Kind of wish I wouldn't have cut it off, but anyway, it could be grafted back on, or this one could be used, either one. And then I have the fender opening right here. This actually goes on the passenger side. This is the rear edge of the fender that is on the C8 to C2 conversion, and this is actually the door edge right there, so that's the distance. And so if you look at this, I can just do it right here. We'll flip this backwards, and let's say that's the edge. You can see there's where the edge of the door is, which is just where those vents, pretty much exactly where I've got it cut off right there. Not sure what we're going to do about that. Probably just make that flat, but we'll get to that when we start mocking stuff up. All right, so this side's taken care of. Between all these pieces, there's enough to piece together the whole thing. These things can be grafted on and figure out what to do. Still have to do the hood opening, but we'll figure that out when we get there. All right, so then on the passenger side, I have the front end from the C2 to C8. This one they didn't cut off as bad, so it's the actual length it's supposed to be. All right, so you can see again that where that vent starts, might be able to completely eliminate the vent, cut it in front of that, might not. In any case, it would be relatively easy just to fill that in or cover it up. Let's see. Oh, but this fender flare is in bad shape. It was from the mold, the splash mold that I made over here. What I did was, it was a green mold, meaning it was the first part made out of the mold. I trusted the release compound, the single-use release compound, or I forget what, semi-permanent, there we go. Release compound, come to find out on a green mold, not a good idea. Now, it'll work if you haven't done any sanding or anything to the surface. But if you've done any sanding, I decided to take some defects off of this side, and that was a mistake because the active sanding apparently made enough grooves that it caused an issue. The other side is relatively okay because I didn't do any sanding there. Oh, and after I sanded it, I polished it with polishing compound and rubbing compound first and polishing compound with a polisher. I thought it would work. All right, so learned my lesson on that one. Shame because there was a almost complete mold, even though, like I said, it doesn't have the fender lips and stuff like that, but it was enough to slap it onto something and say, hey, can we make this something into a Grand Sport type of vehicle? I don't think it's worth repairing. It's just so far so damaged. Now the good thing is that front nose piece is good. Everything released from it well enough, so now I can make front nose pieces, which I'm going to make some of those for wall decorations. All right, so with all that in mind, I needed another fender flare. Oh, while we're here, there's the hood. And again, I've got to figure out what to do. If you look at this, the hood, white hood behind, that is the C2 to C8 hood that I made last year. And it followed the C8 hood. The one in front is the C2 Grand Sport hood. And you can see that it's not wide enough at the back. So I'm thinking of making it look exactly like that by combining the two. So basically that C2 hood would be grafted onto the C8 hood, actually C8 to C2 hood, and make one hood out of it that is shaped kind of an unusual shape, kind of like a bat or a kite or whatever. Anyway, it's got those wings on the outside. All right, but again, we'll have to figure that out when we get there. So, what I've been working on is remaking that fender flare. Well, as long as I had to make the fender flare, might as well make as much of the fender as possible. Now, anyone that knows anything about mold making knows that you've got to be able to remove the mold from the part when you're done. If I were to make one solid mold out of this, there would be no way to get the parts out. No matter what release stuff I used, it would be trapped because of different overlaps. You can see that the fender, that lip that I was talking about, this thing would be trapped. It has to come out this way if you do this bottom edge. So it can't come out this way because the other side would keep it from coming out. So on the other one, I said, okay, anything that's going to trap it, I'm going to not put on. This one, I said, no, I want this to be as accurate, as right, or as full as possible. So what I did, I looked at, okay, how can I get the most of this in one piece without trapping it in the mold? And so you can see, I'm thinking that it stops at the midpoint. Here, let me get underneath here. A little bit past the midpoint because it's easier if you've got a little bit of overlap. So anyway, it goes a little bit past the midpoint and then covers everything. So I'm thinking when I'm done, everything that is low on it and starts going in, I'm going to remove. So you can see that I just went to the peak of the nose. I went a little bit past just to have something to cut. Same thing here. I just went a little bit past the edge. I may end up having to cut that, or I may be able to flex it enough. But anyway, so this would be able to come forward. So let's look at, okay, so the things that would prevent it from going forward though is this piece right here. You can see that's what, 3 inches or so. That would have required this to flex out quite a bit to be able to come out. That may be possible, don't know. So then the other option is to rotate it around the front. So if you look at my arm here, if I go to remove it, I want to rotate it this way. All right, so what would keep that from happening? Well, we've got the same thing here, that this is not going to want to rotate. This would have to be pulled out past here to be able to rotate. Now I'm purposely making these thin The original part is very thin because it's a racing part. My mold is relatively thin because I'm just trying to get something done, so I'm only going to do 2 layers. So it's not going to be as thin as the actual part. It'll be probably twice as thick as that, but it's still pretty flexible. I mean, you can see this thing's flexible. So I could flex that and get it to come out, and then it would rotate this way. Well, can't rotate this way because of that same lip. So that's out unless I can pull this out far enough. So anyway, so then the other option is to rotate it this way. That's going to cause a problem right here because obviously everything up here is going to rotate this way with no issue. This is not, but it slants in right here. So I'm thinking that possibly if this is a little bit flexible, that the whole thing can rotate. Now we're talking about rotating this direction. There we go, this direction. So the center, I pull it off from the center and lift up on it, and everything should rotate out this way. So that's my plan. Once I get it lifted off, released from this, there's going to be some flexibility, and I might be able to finagle it. So it won't be 100% rotated this way. It'll be rotated this way. Sorry, I'm doing my arm, you may not, but it'll be rotated this way enough to get stuff to clear, to release and clear. Then I may rotate it this way, pull this out. This, once it's loose, will be able to come forward as this comes out. So I'm thinking that this is going to work. The only issue is this lip right here. But you can see that's a really small lip. What is that, 3/4 of an inch maybe? So I'm thinking that I can pull this up a little bit, and then I'll be able to rotate the thing around, and that'll come out. We'll see. Obviously I have my multi-tool, the vibrating cutter, and I will start to take this apart, and any place that I see that won't work, I'm just going to cut it off. Of course, I'll separate it from the actual part so I don't damage the original part. Anyway, so that's where I'm at. So if this works, then I will repeat it on the other side, and between the two, I will have most of a front end for a Grand Sport mold. Again, I have the nose as a separate mold sitting over there that I can use, so between all of these pieces, I can then make a duplicate of a Grand Sport front end. Again, I'll know in a couple of days. So what I did was I went ahead and did part of this. I've been getting air pockets. As hard as I try, there still ends up being some air pockets in between the gel coat and the fiberglass. I roll it, I do what you're supposed to do, but I was shocked when I found an air pocket on one of mine, because I would have sworn with what I was doing, I wouldn't do that. The other thing is, some people are giving me a hard time about not doing this right, quote, right. There's a reason for that. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Pareto principle that says that, let's see, you can get 80% of the work done in 20% of the time, but that last 20% takes the other 80% of the time. Well, that was my goal. Let me get to that 80-20 part, no matter what I have to do, which means quick and dirty things. And then don't spend time, the 80% of the time, getting that last 20%, which again is why I left off the fender lips and stuff like that on that other mold. So that's my goal here. This one, I stretched it a little bit because I wanted this to be a finished mold that I can reuse. So I was a little more careful about making it. The whole point of this is it's taken me 10 times longer to do this than it did to do that splash mold. So that's why I do all these quick splash molds, because if I was doing it like I did the other one in a day. I've been working on this 4 days so far, and I still got more to do. So the amount of time, again, if I would have used the right release on that one, that would have been a perfectly good mold, with the exception of fender lips, which I could add later. Anyway, just wanted to bring that up, that, I'm not doing stuff the right way on purpose. There's a reason why I'm doing things the way I am, and it's because I need to get stuff done as quickly as possible. One of the other things I wanted to point out is when I'm doing these partial molds, I put tape where the mold is going to finish. This way, when I'm ready to take it off, I have something to grab onto. I can just grab this and pull it, and that'll get started. Otherwise, you've got to get underneath this edge right here, and it depends on what's going on and how well it adheres and all of that stuff. So anyway, that's one of those tips that makes things easier. Other areas, I just left enough material here that when I'm ready, I can pull that off. Now, since I had that problem with the part and mold sticking together, I've been going overboard. I've been using the same release compound, semi-permanent release compound, and I put a couple of coats of it. It's a spray that you can, I have a squirt bottle that I use, and that gets it on there, and then you can spread it with a towel or a cloth or whatever. And then it says, hey, let it sit for 5 minutes and you're ready to go. I go ahead and have done that twice. Then I come back and put some non-silicone mold wax release on it, and I put 2 coats of that. Then I follow that with PVA. So between all of those, one of them is going to prevent it from sticking. Well, the end result is they work very well together, in fact, too well. On one of the fenders I made, I put the gel coat on, the tooling gel coat on the part. I treated it, put the tooling gel coat, and then I said, oh, I'll just set it out in the sun to get the tooling gel coat to cure faster. That was a mistake. The tooling gel coat changed shape, I guess, because of the heat. The sun was hitting the gel coat, not hitting the mold, and so it caused thermal expansion. And I had what's called pre-release, where the gel coat literally released from the part. And so then I was kind of screwed because I could walk up to it and touch it, and it literally, it was like, well, it was these curves actually where it was doing it, which is kind of critical that they're right. So I learned my lesson. One, I don't put things in the sun to cure them faster because of that. And then secondly, I'm probably going to have to back off on my release regimen. Not sure what I'm going to keep using, what I'm going to eliminate, because again, I don't want the parts to stick together, but there's got to be some right combination, because you obviously can't have that. Now, the other thing is, I waited quite a while between the gel coat and the resin fiberglass. Not that long though. I mean, so anyway, pre-release can be an issue, so be careful when you do that. Don't go overboard on your release. Anyway, one of those things I learned from experience the hard way, because what I ended up doing, I had to cut out. I really should have redone all of it, but I didn't want to redo. I would have had to redo the PVA, and I didn't want to redo the PVA. So what I did was I cut out the stuff that had pre-released, put down more gel coat to replace that, and then went ahead. Now what happened was there was a step or a seam between the old gel coat and the new gel coat, and I ended up having to sand that off. Not a big deal, but it did take extra time. It was one of those, which is going to take less time, redoing the PVA and the gel coat, or just cutting out and redoing the gel coat and then fixing it afterwards. I chose the second option. Not sure that was the best one. Have no way of knowing unless I would have tried it. But anyway, it was just a matter of doing some sanding. And of course, I've got electric sander, so it's not that big of a deal. And it was a seam line, basically not an even one. So anyway, it allowed me to fix it. In fact, it was on that fender that you see right there is the one that did it. And let me see. I'm pretty sure I got all of it out, or at least 90-some% of it. But yeah, you can barely see right there, that little line right there. That was where the gel coat, it wasn't even where it was pre-released, but it did go all the way across here. So I went ahead and cut that out and redid the gel coat. and then it was kind of a jagged line that went to the back here. But again, I was able to sand it and save it, so it worked out. All right, so like, subscribe, hit the alert. Oh, and if you're noticing, I wanted to make sure there weren't any air pockets here, so I went ahead. It's hard to get these 90-degree turns to work, especially the external ones. So what I did was I went ahead and said, I'm just going to get to here and ignore the 90-degree turn. So now I'm going to come in with my vibrating cutter, cut it along here, and then put the inside lip, if you would, right there. That inside lip, it doesn't have any fiberglass reinforcement. So I did as much as I could yesterday with this thing upright. And then I wanted to make sure I got the bottom side well, so I flipped the whole thing over. And now I'm going to reinforce this right here. I mixed up some resin with some Cabicil, which is a thickening agent, and what else? Oh, micro balloons, just because I had them there. Micro balloons just makes it, is a filler material, makes it lighter. So that's why that's white colored there. You wouldn't normally see white, but it's because of the heavy Cabicil and micro balloons. And so I filled all the areas that would tend to have air pockets, so that when I put the mat on here, it doesn't have to make a hard 90-degree bend. It's a more gentle bend. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to come in here and sand this. I'm going to cut off here. It messed up because it was sitting upright, and gravity just is your enemy on some of this. So it let this sag down. So I'm going to cut this out, redo it while it's facing this direction. I do have some chip clips, and I should have used those on this. It would have fixed that issue. So I'm going to use those this time to handle if it does fall off here or here. It shouldn't be as bad. It's when the thing is literally 90 degrees like this. It was sitting upright, and the weight of this excess area just starts pulling it away. One of the other things you can do is not have any excess area, but then when you're trimming your material, you've got to be real accurate. And again, that takes a lot of extra time. So instead, I'm just dealing with doing it this way. So I'm going to hit this with a sander just to knock off the high spots because there's some areas that stick up. What happened is it's 100 degrees out here. Not right now, but it will be in a couple of hours. And so the stuff cures really fast. Even though I'm doing the minimal amount, I'm only doing 1% of hardener or catalyst. And even then, the stuff cures pretty fast. So and I only mix 2 cups at a time to cover 8 square feet. But what happens is while I'm doing that, it starts hardening. And then once it starts hardening or curing, it starts clumping, and it gets these solids in there. I honestly should have stopped, and this is something I've learned. I don't follow my own advice all the time, but something I've learned is stop. Just throw away the material. It's only, a half a cup at most, a quarter of a cup, and I should have done that in this case, but I thought, So what happens is when you have detailed areas like this with a lot of curves, it takes more time to put down the material. Whereas obviously large areas, you can put it down relatively quickly. So I didn't have it be an issue on the large areas, but when I started getting into these detailed areas, it started curing before I was ready. So anyway, another one of those things. I guess I could only mix it a cup at a time, but then I'd have to cut my fiberglass sheets in half. Anyway, I may do that because this 100-degree heat is just really making this difficult. All right, there we go. Now, like, subscribe, hit the alert, hit the things that you want to donate, and if you don't know what I'm doing, you don't know jack. Bye.